Chapter 3: Manipulation Tactics and Strategies. 3.1 Gaslighting: Undermining Perception of Reality. Gaslighting is a form of psychological manipulation where the manipulator seeks to sow seeds of doubt in a person or group, making them question their own memory, perception, or judgment, often evoking in them cognitive dissonance and other changes including low self-esteem. The term originates from the 1938 stage play Gaslight, where a husband dims the lights in their home, which were powered by gas, and denies that the lights have changed when his wife points it out in an effort to make her doubt her own perceptions and to accept his control. This technique is deployed in a variety of settings, including personal relationships, professional environments, and by those in power on a wider societal scale. When gaslighting someone, the perpetrator typically employs a series of manipulative tactics over time. The purpose here is to delegitimize the victim's beliefs by repeatedly challenging the credibility of their experiences. It starts with trivial contradictions and escalates to more significant and sustained challenges over time. These tactics are often subtle and can be executed through direct denial, misdirection, contradiction, and misinformation. As a result, the victim of gaslighting might become confused, anxious, isolated, and unable to trust their own memory or judgment. Gaslighters often use persistent denial, misdirection, contradiction, and lying to destabilize the victim and delegitimize the victim's belief. They may tell blatant lies or deny they ever said something, even if the victim has proof of the statement. This is designed to make the victim question the validity of their own recollection and eventually become less confident in their ability to discern truth from fiction. By constantly moving the goalposts, gaslighters avoid accountability and can control the narrative. A gaslighter's denial is often accompanied by projection, where they accuse the victim of the very actions they are perpetrating. For example, if the gaslighter is being deceitful, they may accuse the victim of being dishonest. This not only diverts attention away from the gaslighter's actions, but can also make the victim doubt their own morality and perspective, wondering if they are indeed at fault. By projecting their own faults onto their victim, gaslighters muddy the waters of truth, creating an environment where their control can thrive. Questions are another tool in the gaslighter's arsenal. By questioning the victim's memory and thoughts, the manipulator creates a sense of doubt. The constant questioning can erode the victim's confidence in their own recollection and cognitive abilities. Phrases such as, "Are you sure?" or "You tend to have a bad memory," are frequently used and over time can considerably weaken a person's self-assurance. Contradictory questions or statements that challenge the victim's memory can inflict a great deal of psychological stress. Rebuking the perception of reality is rigorous work. Thus, manipulators will often use phrases like, "You're overreacting," or "You're too sensitive," to trivialize the victim's feelings and reactions to their abusive behavior. These statements not only negate the victim's experience, but also suggest that their emotional responses are faulty or inappropriate, gradually persuading them to disregard their feelings and submit to the gaslighter's narrative. The effacement of reality is further achieved through isolation tactics. The gaslighter may prevent the victim from interacting with others who might support their views or beliefs. Isolation can be physical, such as deterring the victim from visiting friends or family, or psychological, such as making them feel that no one else shares or understands their perspective. This isolation can lead the victim to become more dependent on the gaslighter for their sense of reality. In an effort to control the narrative, a gaslighter will often manipulate information available to the victim. This might involve selective omission of details, lying about events, or blocking access to evidence that would confirm the victim's understanding of events. By controlling the information flow, the gaslighter can prevent the victim from gaining a clear or alternate perspective. This forces reliance on the gaslighter's version of reality. The cumulative effect of these tactics results in the victim's loss of confidence in themselves and their perception of reality. Once the victim is uncertain, the gaslighter gains the ability to shape reality and perceptions to suit their purposes. The victim's ability to trust in their senses, memories, and judgment is eroded, leaving them vulnerable to further manipulation. The process often results in depression, anxiety, and a sense of helplessness in the victim. Over time, the debilitating effect of gaslighting can have serious long-term consequences on the mental health of the victim. It may lead to severe emotional distress, including anxiety and depression. Victims may struggle with decision-making, feel hopeless, and suffer from a decline in their overall well-being. In severe cases, prolonged exposure to gaslighting can result in trauma or PTSD. It is essential for individuals to recognize the signs of gaslighting and seek support to avoid or mitigate these outcomes. Ending the cycle of gaslighting involves recognizing the tactics used by the gaslighter, reaffirming one's own perception of reality, and often removing oneself from the gaslighter's influence. Building a support system, seeking professional help, and establishing boundaries can empower victims to regain confidence in their perception of reality. Being aware of gaslighting methods and understanding the motive behind them can prepare one to fend off current and future attempts at manipulation. It is crucial to foster environments, both at home and in society, where communication and perceptions are respected and manipulation is regarded with zero tolerance. 3.2. Love bombing and the creation of obligation. Love bombing is a manipulation technique that involves showering someone with affection, praise, or attention to influence their behavior or decision-making process. It is typically characterized by excessive communication, compliments, gifts, and flattery designed to create a sense of debt or obligation in the recipient. The ultimate goal of love bombing is to establish control and manipulate the target into a desired action or behavior. The strategy behind love bombing lies in exploiting the human need for affection and validation. When individuals receive an overwhelming amount of attention and approval, they often experience heightened emotions such as joy, gratitude, and self-worth. These powerful emotions can cloud judgment and make it challenging to maintain objectivity about the situation or individual providing the attention. As a result, the target may become more susceptible to the manipulator's influence. Love bombing can occur in various contexts, ranging from personal relationships to political campaigns and even in the workplace. In romantic relationships, it may manifest through constant compliments, gifts, and promises for a future together, often at a pace that is unusually rapid for a healthy relationship. In politics, candidates may employ love bombing by making grandiose promises or engaging in excessive flattery of voters to gain support. In work environments, superiors or colleagues may use love bombing by giving excessive praise or rewards to an employee to foster loyalty or push an agenda. The manipulator's aim through love bombing is to create a sense of obligation in the target. This sense of obligation can be powerful because it can induce the targeted individual to reciprocate the attention and favors, even if it goes against their best interests. People are generally inclined to reciprocate positive gestures due to social norms and the desire to maintain balance in relationships. The manipulator leverages this inclination to their advantage, often resulting in the target taking actions they might not have taken otherwise. One of the crucial aspects of love bombing is the imbalance it creates. The manipulator typically gives at a level that is disproportionate to the length or depth of the relationship, which can pressure the recipient to match the level of commitment or intensity prematurely. This pressure can lead to a breakdown in the target's ability to enforce personal boundaries, making them more malleable to the manipulator's wishes. It is important to recognize that love bombing is not always a conscious or intentional act. In some cases, individuals may genuinely believe that they are showing love or appreciation, unaware of the coercive nature of their actions. However, whether intentional or not, the effects of love bombing can be harmful, as they undermine the target's autonomy and can lead to unhealthy dynamics, such as dependency or an imbalanced power dynamic in the relationship. The deceptiveness of love bombing also comes from its temporary nature. The excessive affection is often unsustainable and may cease once the manipulator achieves their goal. The target may then be left feeling confused, hurt, or betrayed, leading to a cycle where they seek to regain the initial affection, further entrenching the manipulator's influence. Identifying love bombing can be challenging, especially for the individual experiencing it. Common signs include the manipulator expressing intense emotions that seem disproportionate to the level of intimacy or length of the relationship, a push for quick commitment, and isolation from friends or family. Being aware of these signs can help individuals maintain a critical perspective and protect themselves from manipulation. Individuals who suspect they are being subjected to love bombing should evaluate the relationship critically and consider external perspectives. Seeking advice from trusted friends or professionals can provide a more objective view of the situation. Establishing and maintaining boundaries is also essential for preventing manipulation. Clearly communicating limits and expectations can discourage the manipulator's advances and protect the target's emotional well-being. Love bombing is a manipulative tactic used to create a sense of obligation and control over the recipient. By recognizing the signs of love bombing and maintaining strong personal boundaries, individuals can mitigate the risk of being manipulated and preserve their autonomy. Understanding and acknowledging the potential for such manipulation tactics in various aspects of life is critical for fostering healthier, more balanced relationships and interactions. 3.3. The use of fear, obligation, and guilt, fog. Manipulation is a complex psychological craft that often involves playing on the emotions and perceptions of individuals to guide their decisions without them being aware of it. One of the main ways that manipulation is enacted is through the use of fear, obligation, and guilt, fog. These emotional states can be powerful drivers of human behavior and can be triggered in subtle and overt ways to influence someone's actions and thoughts. The use of fear in manipulation is about creating a sense that there is potential for harm, discomfort, or negative consequences if a specific course of action is not followed. This does not need to be a physical threat, but can also be the fear of losing social status, upsetting a power balance, or facing emotional strains. Manipulators will often use fear by highlighting the worst-case scenarios or suggesting that certain events are inevitable without compliance. This exaggerated forecasting can push an individual to act in a way that they believe will minimize the perceived risk. Obligation is another powerful tool in the manipulator's toolbox. It relies on a sense of duty or debt that the target feels they owe to the manipulator or a certain group. This can be instilled through cultural norms, social customs, or personal favors where reciprocity is expected. By calling on this sense of obligation, a manipulator can provoke action from the target by making them feel that they have no other choice but to comply owing to social etiquette, professional duties, or an implied contract of give and take. This sensation of being indebted often clouds judgment and can override personal interests or fair reasoning. Guilt is closely related to obligation, but hinges more on moral and emotional components rather than a sense of social or professional duty. Guilt is elicited by making an individual feel responsible for an action or outcome, often retrospectively. The manipulator can amplify this feeling by emphasizing the personal disappointment or distress caused to others. This tactic is effective because most people are naturally inclined to avoid harming others and will take steps to redeem themselves, even if the basis of the guilt is irrational or unfounded. The combination of fear, obligation, and guilt can create a potent fog that clouds an individual's judgment, making it difficult to see the reality of the situation. When these emotions are used together, they can make the target more malleable and susceptible to suggestion. For example, a manipulator might imply that failing to act fear on a responsibility, obligation, has caused harm, guilt, which creates a cycle that can be hard to break free from. Understanding how fog tactics are used requires an analysis of both the methods and the desired outcomes. The process often begins by the manipulator forging a relationship of perceived trust or authority over the target. Once this foundation is laid, the manipulator can then introduce elements of FOG in a manner that seems justified within the context of the relationship. To the target, the reactions provoked by fear, obligation, and guilt may feel natural, even when they're disproportionate to the situation. The deployment of fear, obligation, and guilt in manipulation also depends on timing and context. Manipulators often wait for moments of vulnerability or decisions where there's high emotional investment. By introducing fog at these critical junctures, they enhance its effectiveness, exploiting the heightened emotional state of the target. This strategic timing can make the difference between the success and failure of a manipulative endeavor. To resist manipulation through fog, it's important for individuals to recognize the dynamics at play. Awareness of these tactics can often serve as a shield, fostering a level of skepticism towards attempts to manipulate. However, for complete protection, this awareness must be coupled with the determination to question the validity of the obligations, fears, and guilt imposed upon oneself. Critical thinking and the ability to distinguish between genuine and false causes for these emotions are crucial skills to develop. However, not all uses of fog are inherently negative or harmful. For example, societal norms that rely on a sense of obligation can be beneficial in maintaining order and promoting pro-social behavior. Fear can be used in persuasive arguments to deter people from engaging in harmful practices, such as smoking or reckless driving. Even guilt can play a constructive role when it encourages personal growth or the amendment of a genuine wrong. It is the manipulative use of fog to undermine autonomy and coerce behavior that is ethically questionable. The fine line between influence and manipulation often lies in the intent behind the use of fear, obligation, and guilt, and the openness with which the consequences of actions are presented. Manipulative uses of fog are typically characterized by a lack of transparency and an imbalance in the relationship between the manipulator and the target. The use of fear, obligation, and guilt as manipulative tactics can deeply affect decision-making processes and personal agency. These tactics are subtle, exploiting basic human emotions to drive individuals towards actions they might not otherwise take. Understanding these tactics, their application, and their ethical implications is paramount for anyone looking to navigate the complex web of human interactions without falling prey to manipulation. Whether in personal relationships, professional settings, or broader social structures, the knowledge of fog is essential in both the practice and defense against manipulation. 3.4. Triangulation and creating discord. Triangulation is a sophisticated manipulation strategy where the manipulator intentionally creates tension or discord between two or more other parties, often remaining somewhat removed from the conflict themselves. This tactic leverages the third party as a means to create an imbalance of power and to control or influence a situation indirectly. Manipulators using triangulation typically exploit trust and communication gaps between the parties involved, positioning themselves as a necessary go-between or trusted ally to all sides. Triangulation manipulators might share misinformation or use selective communication to pit individuals or groups against each other, creating factions or conflict where there might have been none. The process often starts by establishing trust with all parties involved. The manipulator will appear sympathetic and approachable, encouraging others to confide in them. By building rapport individually, they ensure that their perceived integrity is not questioned when information is shared or withheld. Once individual relationships are solidified, the manipulator begins to subtly relay information or even misinformation between the parties. These communications are often framed in a way that highlights differences or issues, exaggerating them to foster doubts or jealousy. Critically, the manipulator takes care to appear impartial or helpful, obscuring their divisive intent. Triangulation in a business setting might involve a manipulative employee causing rifts between colleagues or departments. They may go to one party and express a supposed concern brought up by the other, when in fact, this concern might be entirely fabricated or taken out of context. The intention could be to undermine teamwork, making the manipulator indispensable as a communicator, or to redirect blame for a failure onto others. By doing so, they control the narrative and subsequent response to the situation, effectively directing the outcomes in a manner that serves their personal agenda or objectives. In personal relationships, triangulation may be used to maintain control and power dynamics. For example, a manipulative person might tell a friend about the supposedly negative opinion of a mutual acquaintance, altering the friend's perception and instigating conflict. Alternatively, the manipulator might play the role of confidant to two friends, continually passing along comments and creating misunderstandings. This tactic often shifts the spotlight away from the manipulator's behavior, preventing others from seeing their true intentions or addressing their actions. It also commonly leaves the manipulated individuals feeling they need to compete for the manipulator's favor or support. Another facet of triangulation is the strategic alignment with a perceived authority figure or an influential individual. Manipulators use this relationship to validate their viewpoints or actions to others within a triangle. Aligning with authority figures lends weight to the manipulator's narrative, making it more challenging for the other parties to question the validity of the manipulator's statements or actions. Such dynamics can be particularly damaging in hierarchical settings, such as workplaces or familial structures, where the power differential is already in play. Transparency and open communication can usually counter triangulation strategies, but manipulators often create environments where these are lacking. They foster a culture of secrecy and selective sharing, ensuring that they are the primary source of information. By controlling the flow of communication, they ensure that direct discussions between the other parties do not occur, thereby solidifying their central position. Furthermore, the manipulator may exaggerate the consequences of open dialogue, instilling fear that direct confrontation will exacerbate the issue rather than resolve it. A common consequence of triangulation is the erosion of trust between the parties that are being manipulated. As trust diminishes, dependence on the manipulator increases. The manipulator will often offer solutions or mediate disputes, reinforcing their perceived indispensability and benevolence in the process. Over time, this can create an attachment or loyalty to the manipulator, as the victims may feel indebted for their supposed assistance, ignoring the fact that the conflict may have originated from the manipulator themselves. Moreover, triangulation can have long-term psychological effects on those involved. It can lead to stress, anxiety, and decreased self-esteem for the manipulated individuals as they grapple with the resulting conflicts. The situation can become debilitating, especially when the individuals are unable to pinpoint the source or reason behind the discord. The manipulator's role in fostering the disharmony is often obscured by their display of concern and involvement in resolution, making it difficult to identify the manipulation at play. For the manipulator, triangulation can be a high-risk strategy. If the parties involved communicate and discover the deceit, the manipulator can face significant backlash and lose their influence. The manipulator must continually balance the information they manipulate and maintain the trust of all parties for triangulation to be effective. The ability of the manipulator to navigate these relationships and the subsequent complications highlights the complexity of their tactics. To counter triangulation, individuals must be vigilant in their interactions and skeptical of information that could foster conflict. Open lines of communication between all parties are fundamental in dismantling the manipulator's constructed narrative. Encouraging transparency and practicing direct communication can prevent the manipulator from triangulating successfully. Recognizing the pattern of manipulation can be challenging, but it remains the most effective measure against the divisive outcomes of triangulation. Triangulation is a nefarious and complex form of manipulation that can be exploited in various contexts to control and influence individuals or groups effectively. Its impact can be profound, resulting in damaged relationships and psychological harm. Awareness and open communication are vital defenses against triangulation. Individuals and organizations should be proactive in fostering environments where direct dialogue is the norm, and where transparency is upheld to mitigate the risk of such manipulative tactics taking root. 3.5 Hoovering and the cycle of abuse. Hoovering, named after the famous vacuum cleaner brand, is a manipulation tactic often observed in the cyclical pattern of abuse and is common in relationships with individuals displaying high levels of narcissism or psychopathy. This technique describes the strategic efforts by an abuser to reassert control over a former victim's life. In essence, the process entails the abuser reaching out to the victim after a period of estrangement, with the purpose of sucking them back into the dysfunctional and potentially harmful dynamic from which the victim may have once distanced themselves. These attempts at reconnection can manifest through seemingly benign texts, calls, or encounters, which are orchestrated cleverly to elicit an emotional response from the victim. The essence of the hoovering tactic lies in the abuser's capacity to recognize and capitalize on the emotional or psychological vulnerabilities of their victim. Abusers are adept at reading their targets and are skilled at flipping the dynamic from one that is overtly hostile to one that feigns care, concern, or even contrition. They might do this by apologizing for past wrongdoing, making promises for change, or even presenting grand gestures of affection. These acts are not genuine displays of empathy. Rather, they are calculated moves to regain proximity and control. The victim, often still emotionally attached or dependent, can find these overtures confusing and compelling, which might lead to a reinstatement of the relationship. Understanding the cycle of abuse is crucial to recognizing the hoovering tactic as a part of it. The cycle of abuse usually follows a set pattern, beginning with tension building, followed by an incident of verbal, emotional, or physical abuse, then reconciliation, and finally, a calm or honeymoon phase. It's during the reconciliation or honeymoon phases that hoovering often takes place. An abuser who senses a loss of control may resort to hoovering to bring the victim back into the cycle, before the victim can fully detach from the relationship or seek help. The manipulation during hoovering is deeply psychological and relies on the abuser's insight into their victim's inherent desires for validation, love, or stability within the relationship. The abuser may offer false promises that address these desires directly. "I promise to go to therapy," "I will never hurt you again," or "we are meant to be together," are examples of manipulative commitments commonly used to entice the victim into re-engagement. These assurances play on the victim's hope for a better future with the abuser, overriding rational judgments based on past behavior. Victims of hoovering may struggle to resist the tactic due to various factors such as low self-esteem, fear of loneliness, or a history of trauma bonding. A strong emotional attachment formed from repetitive cycles of abuse interspersed with periods of positive reinforcement. The condition of intermittent reinforcement that victims experience ensures that the abusive relationship provides just enough positive stimulus to keep hopes alive and maintain ties to the abuser. This dynamic creates a situation where a victim might long for the abuser's approval and affection, making them particularly susceptible to hoovering strategies. Strategies that are often employed in hoovering may include using mutual friends or family members as intermediaries to communicate the abuser's supposed remorse and desire for reconciliation. The abuser might reach out on significant dates, such as anniversaries or holidays, to play on shared memories and emotions. They also may feign crises or illnesses to elicit sympathy or a sense of obligation from their victim. Sometimes, an abuser might even resort to using children, if involved, as emotional leverage to pull the victim back into their orbit. To resist hoovering effectively, victims are encouraged to establish firm boundaries and to enforce no-contact rules. It's important for victims to recognize the pattern of the abuse cycle and to understand that hoovering is merely a continuation of that cycle, not a genuine opportunity for change. Therapy, support groups, and educational resources are valuable tools for individuals seeking to extricate themselves from the cycle of abuse. Learning about the nature of manipulative tactics can provide victims with clarity and validation, and awareness can diminish the manipulator's power. Legal interventions, such as restraining orders or protective orders, can provide a framework of security and serve as deterrents to abusers considering hoovering. Legal recourse can also empower victims, providing them with a sense of control and a clear message to the abuser that their manipulative tactics will not be tolerated. Partnering with law enforcement or legal counsel can fortify a victim's resolve to maintain distance and safeguard their well-being. Aiding victims to bolster their support systems is another critical strategy in combating the effects of hoovering. Building strong relationships with friends, family members, and professionals creates a network of people who can offer guidance, perspective, and emotional support. A robust support system can act as a buffer against the abuser's tactics, ensuring that the victim is not isolated and has allies to help maintain their resistance against the cycle of abuse. Hoovering is a manipulation tool employed by abusers that aim to lure victims back into an abusive cycle through psychological manipulation and false promises. It preys on emotional vulnerabilities and tends to occur during moments when the abuser senses their control slipping. By recognizing the cycle of abuse and the manipulative nature of hoovering, victims can take actionable steps to protect themselves and break free from the toxic patterns of their past. Empowerment, education, and support are fundamental to resisting hoovering and fostering a path towards healing and independence. 3.6. Silent treatment and psychological punishment. The silent treatment is a form of psychological punishment and a passive-aggressive tactic often used to manipulate an individual or group into feeling powerless or less important. It involves the manipulator deliberately ignoring or refusing to communicate with the victim. This kind of emotional manipulation aims to assert control and can cause significant psychological effects. By withholding communication, the manipulator can make the victim feel rejected, instigate self-doubt, and provoke a sense of exclusion. The silent treatment is a form of nonverbal intimidation that exploits the human need for social interaction and acknowledgement. Those on the receiving end may become desperate for resolution, leading them to comply with the demands or expectations of the manipulator without even realizing they have been coerced. The effectiveness of the silent treatment lies in its subtlety. Unlike overt forms of punishment or coercion, it does not involve direct confrontation or the use of physical force. The manipulator imposes a form of social ostracism that leaves few traces and is hard to prove. As a consequence, victims often struggle to articulate their experiences to others, which can lead to isolation and compound the feelings of unworthiness and insecurity. These feelings may drive the victim to make amends or change behavior to regain the favor of the manipulator, despite not being at fault. This fear of abandonment is leveraged by the manipulator to reinforce their position of power and to manipulate outcomes to their advantage. Implementing the silent treatment requires little to no resources, making it an easily accessible form of manipulation. It can be applied in various settings, including personal relationships, workplaces, and even in parenting. In the workplace, for instance, a manager might ignore an employee's contributions or communications, indirectly pushing them to work harder or dissuading them from raising concerns. In personal relationships, one partner might use the silent treatment to control or punish the other for behaviors they dislike. Parents might unknowingly use it as a disciplinary measure, potentially causing long-term emotional and psychological harm to children. The message the silent treatment sends is clear: conform to my expectations or face exclusion. The silent treatment can lead to a cycle of manipulation. In this cycle, tension builds until the victim responds to the silent treatment by changing their behavior to please the manipulator. Once the victim has complied, the manipulator typically resumes communication, only to reinstate the silence when they want to enforce hegemony again. This intermittent reinforcement can be confusing and emotionally draining for the victim. The lack of predictability causes stress and anxiety, leading to an unhealthy dynamic in which the victim might go to great lengths to avoid the punishment of silence. They learn to anticipate and submit to the manipulator's wishes, often giving up their own needs and desires. Victims' responses to the silent treatment vary based on their individual psychological makeup and the context of the relationship. Some may react by withdrawing and becoming more introspective, while others might react outwardly with anger or desperation. The manipulator observes these reactions to determine the effectiveness of the technique and to refine their approach. Understanding the pattern of the victim's responses allows the manipulator to tailor the silent treatment to maximize control and dependency. Forcing the victim into a reactive position weakens their capacity to challenge the manipulator or the manipulation itself. The silent treatment functions as a means of eroding self-esteem. By consistently ignoring someone, the manipulator sends an implicit message that the victim is not worthy of attention or respect. Over time, repeated exposure to this treatment can significantly lower the victim's self-worth. They may blame themselves for the lack of communication and begin to internalize the perception that they are at fault. This self-blame can transition into a self-fulfilling prophecy where the victim unconsciously engages in behaviors that fulfill the negative narrative set by the manipulator. As the victim becomes more entrenched in this mindset, their ability to resist manipulation diminishes. It is imperative to recognize the silent treatment for what it is, a tool to manipulate and control. Unmasking this tactic involves acknowledging the manipulator's intent and understanding that the silent treatment is a reflection of their desire for power, not a reflection of one's own worth. As individuals become aware of this dynamic, they can set boundaries to protect themselves from such psychological attacks. This can include seeking open communication, expressing feelings about being ignored, or in some cases disengaging from the manipulator entirely. Taking proactive steps can help restore the balance of power in a relationship and reinforce the victim's sense of self and autonomy. Overcoming the silent treatment requires resilience and often outside support. This can come in the form of counseling, support groups, or trusted friends and family. Speaking with others who understand and validate the experience is affirming and can significantly reduce the manipulator's power. It's necessary to reconstruct a sense of personal worth disconnected from the manipulator's validation. Affirmative self-talk, assertiveness training, and developing healthy social networks can all contribute to a recovery from manipulation. Reconstructing damaged self-esteem and relearning to trust oneself are vital steps in healing from the silent treatment. Legal and organizational policies are also critical in combating the silent treatment in formal settings like the workplace. Organizations can establish clear communication guidelines and encourage a culture of open dialogue. For example, anti-bullying policies can be put in place to address psychological punishments, including the silent treatment. Training programs that facilitate the development of constructive conflict resolution and communication skills can help prevent manipulative behaviors from taking root. It is essential that such systems support victims and hold manipulators accountable for their actions. The silent treatment is a manipulative tactic that preys on the psychological vulnerabilities of individuals. Its effectiveness resides in its subtlety and the powerlessness it evokes. While it might seem minimal compared to overt forms of coercion, the silent treatment can cause severe psychological impacts and lead to significant harm. Educating individuals on the nature of this tactic and strategies to counteract it is vital to mitigating its effects. Developing personal strengths, promoting a culture of open communication, and instituting support systems are all effective measures. Taking these steps can empower individuals to stand up against manipulation and help create healthier dynamics in personal and professional relationships. 3.7 Projection and blame shifting. Projection and blame shifting are common manipulative tactics that can be both subtle and damaging. Projection is a defense mechanism where individuals attribute their own unacceptable thoughts, feelings, or motives to another person. For example, an individual who is being unfaithful might accuse their partner of infidelity without evidence, effectively diverting attention from their own actions. It serves as a means to avoid facing negative self-judgments and to maintain a self-concept that is more acceptable to the individual. By projecting, a person can alleviate guilt, anxiety, or other disturbing emotions that emerge from recognizing one's own faults. Blame shifting, closely related to projection, is the act of attributing one's own actions, mistakes, or failures to someone else, thereby shifting responsibility away from oneself. In many interpersonal interactions, Particularly within close relationships or teams, it is not uncommon to encounter blame shifting during conflicts. For instance, an employee who misses a deadline might blame the delay on a colleague's slow feedback, despite their own poor time management. Blame shifting can be particularly destructive, as it not only absolves the manipulator of responsibility, but also undermines the self-esteem and credibility of the victim. Individuals who employ projection and blame shifting often do so habitually, making it challenging for those around them to discern truth from manipulation. These manipulators may be adept at creating a narrative in which they are perennially the victim, constantly subjected to unfair treatment by others. This narrative can be convincing, especially when the manipulator is skilled at illustrating their points with selected examples or half-truths. They frequently combine their tactics with emotional appeals, asserting that they feel wronged or hurt, which may prompt others to overlook inconsistencies in their logic. Another aspect of projection and blame shifting is that these tactics can be used preemptively as a defensive strategy. Manipulators might anticipate criticism or accusations against them and proactively project or shift blame onto others to ward off any challenges to their behavior. For example, a manipulator might know that their financial decisions are under scrutiny, so they accuse their critic of fiscal irresponsibility. This preemption serves not only to protect the manipulator's image, but also to put the accused on the defensive, thereby diverting attention and potential criticism. Long-term relationships, whether personal or professional, can be particularly susceptible to damage from projection and blame shifting. Trust is eroded when an individual frequently encounters these manipulative tactics, leading to a breakdown in communication and cooperation. Moreover, blame shifting can instigate a toxic environment where team members or family members are pitted against one another, often unwittingly perpetuating the manipulator's narrative that others are to blame for their shortcomings or misfortunes. To combat projection and blame shifting, it is essential to establish boundaries and insist on accountability. This may involve confronting the manipulator with evidence that contradicts their narrative, or simply affirming one's own perspective and refusing to accept unwarranted blame. Effective communication is key to dismantling the manipulator's tactics, as it is harder for them to distort the truth when confronted with clear, factual information. However, this requires a level of assertiveness and the confidence to challenge manipulative behavior, which can be difficult in the face of emotional manipulation. Not all projection and blame shifting is intentional or malicious. In some cases, individuals might be unaware of their tendencies to project or shift blame, often because these patterns are deeply ingrained in their behavior, perhaps due to past experiences or coping mechanisms learned in childhood. In such scenarios, a different approach may be needed, one that includes empathy and an attempt to help the individual recognize their destructive patterns. Professional counseling or therapy can be beneficial in these cases to address the underlying issues that lead to the use of projection and blame shifting. Understanding the underlying psychology behind projection and blame shifting can also aid in handling these tactics when they occur. People often project or shift blame because they feel threatened, insecure, or powerless. Recognizing these emotional underpinnings may help in responding with more awareness and less reactivity. Instead of returning blame or becoming defensive, which can escalate the situation, maintaining a calm demeanor and focusing on problem solving can be more productive. Lastly, it is worth noting that organizations and societies at large can be influenced by projection and blame shifting. Leaders and those in positions of power may use these tactics to maintain control or divert scrutiny from their policies or actions. This can lead to a culture of blame within an entity where accountability is shirked and progress is hampered. Awareness of these dynamics at every level, from the interpersonal to the institutional, is crucial for the development of healthier, more transparent, and accountable relationships and systems. Projection and blame shifting are manipulation tactics that compromise the integrity of relationships and individuals' sense of responsibility. Whether stemming from deliberate attempts to manipulate or from unexamined psychological patterns, these behaviors can lead to significant interpersonal and societal issues. Recognizing and addressing these tactics is thus vital for fostering environments where honest communication and mutual respect are the norm, and where manipulation has no place to undermine trust and cooperation. 3.8 Baiting and the punishment-reward cycle. Manipulation can be an insidious force in personal and professional relationships. It subtly undermines autonomy, as the manipulator uses tactics that encourage specific behaviors in others without their explicit consent. Baiting, one such tactic, is a manipulation strategy that lures individuals into a particular action or response. It involves presenting an enticing offer or promise that draws someone in, only to leverage that interest to the manipulator's advantage. Unlike persuasion, which is transparent and aims for mutual benefit, baiting often serves the manipulator's goals at the expense of the other person's well-being. The process of baiting begins when the manipulator identifies an individual's desires or vulnerabilities. This knowledge allows the manipulator to craft an attractive proposition tailored to those desires. The offer is not always material. It could also be emotional, such as the promise of approval, love, or acceptance. Bait may also come in the form of a solution to a problem that the targeted individual is keen to resolve. After establishing what the individual finds desirable, the manipulator positions the bait within reach but typically conditions its acquisition on certain behaviors or actions that serve the manipulator's agenda. When the individual takes the bait, they find themselves in the midst of the manipulation cycle. The reward, however, is not guaranteed or may not be as fulfilling as promised. Moreover, the manipulator may withdraw the reward or replace it with a punishment if the desired behaviors are not sustained. This intermittent reinforcement can create a powerful psychological bind. When people occasionally receive the reward they seek, it reinforces their behavior, making it more likely they will repeat the action in anticipation of the reward, even if it is sporadically given. This uncertainty can keep individuals locked in a cycle, continually trying to please the manipulator to regain the reward. Harnessing the punishment-reward cycle, manipulators exert control over their targets. The cycle consists of administrating rewards or punishments in response to the actions of the individual being manipulated. Rewards include positive reinforcement such as praise, monetary gains, or emotional uplift. Conversely, punishment might involve explicit reprimands, the silent treatment, or the withdrawal of previous rewards. Over time, subjects in this manipulation cycle can become increasingly dependent on the manipulator's validation and more susceptible to control. The manipulation cycle relies on inconsistencies in doling out rewards and punishments to perpetuate dependence. The unpredictability of outcomes leads to what is known as variable ratio reinforcement. This technique, found in gambling mechanisms like slot machines, can be especially addictive. In the manipulative context, variable rewards can induce individuals to invest disproportionate time, effort, or resources to the whims of the manipulator. This is because occasional, unpredictable successes often motivate more persistent behavior than consistent rewards do. The manipulator often escalates the requirements for obtaining rewards over time. Initially, the individual may comply with simple requests or relatively minor changes in behavior to obtain the bait. As they become more ensnared in the cycle, the manipulator increases demands, asking for more significant concessions or more pronounced behavior changes. Since individuals are already invested and may have experienced the rewards firsthand, they may concede to these escalating demands, especially if the rewards are intermittently delivered, maintaining the illusion that compliance will lead to desirable outcomes. Baiting can be particularly effective in contexts where there is a power imbalance, such as in employer-employee relationships or in intimate partnerships where emotional manipulation is prevalent. The manipulator often holds a resource or approval that the other desires or depends upon, giving the manipulator leverage. Awareness of these dynamics is critical for the individual to recognize the situation for what it is, a manipulation strategy aimed at controlling their behavior. Breaking free from the punishment-reward cycle can be challenging due to the emotional and psychological bind it creates. Disengaging from the manipulator involves recognizing the pattern of behavior. While rewards may seem attractive, they are tools of control and not genuine tokens of appreciation or affection. Learning to diminish the impact of these rewards by seeking validation internally rather than externally can help individuals regain their agency. Strategies to combat manipulation include the establishment of clear boundaries and the willingness to walk away from situations where baiting is present. By not engaging with the bait, individuals can disrupt the cycle. It is essential to reaffirm personal values and align actions with those values, rather than the manipulator's agenda. Those vulnerable to manipulation may benefit from seeking support from trusted friends, mentors, or professionals who can offer outside perspective and reinforce personal strength. Finally, fostering environments where transparent communication, mutual respect, and genuine concern for others' well-being are prioritized can reduce the occurrence of manipulative tactics such as baiting. Education about manipulation can empower individuals to identify tactics like the punishment-reward cycle in various contexts, including workplaces, families, and social groups. By promoting awareness and resilience, societies can curb the effectiveness of manipulation and encourage healthier, more authentic interactions. 3.9 Isolation Techniques to Increase Dependence. Isolation is a powerful technique often utilized by manipulators to increase an individual's dependence on them. It is a methodical process in which the manipulator seeks to cut off the target from their support systems, such as friends, family, and colleagues. This detachment can be physical, psychological, or both, and it serves to weaken the target's defenses and external influences, making them more susceptible to persuasion and control. The mechanism of isolation is based on the premise that social support provides individuals with perspectives and strength to resist manipulation. By eroding this basis, manipulators create an environment where targets can be more easily shaped according to the manipulator's desires. The first step in the process of isolation often involves the manipulator creating scenarios or narratives that cast doubt on the intentions and integrity of the target's close connections. The manipulator may suggest that friends or family members are not genuinely supportive or are trying to take advantage of the target. Consequently, the target may begin questioning their relationships and the motivations of those around them. This misconception is frequently reinforced through confirmation bias, where the manipulator highlights or fabricates events that support their narrative. The aim is to sow seeds of doubt and to foster a reliance on the manipulator, who positions themselves as the only true ally. Following this, the manipulator will often seek to monopolize the target's time and attention. By demanding increasingly large portions of the target's emotional and physical availability, other relationships are naturally neglected. The manipulator might suggest or insist that activities and time spent with others are unfulfilling or harmful. They create a cycle where the target begins to feel guilt or unease when interacting with their support network, often leading to a gradual withdrawal from previously held relationships. The loss of these relationships deprives the target of contrasting opinions and emotional sustenance, which could otherwise serve as a barrier to manipulation. Subsequent to weakening external support, isolators may introduce or amplify stressors in the target's life to increase their sense of instability and vulnerability. Stress can arise from financial difficulties, work pressures, or conflicts within personal relationships, which the manipulator exacerbates or initiates. The target is often led to believe that these stressors are insurmountable or directly linked to their interactions outside the manipulative relationship. As various forms of stress accumulate, the individual becomes more emotionally dependent on the manipulator for support and guidance, who presents themselves as an indispensable pillar of stability. A manipulator applying isolation techniques may also restrict the target's access to information. They can filter the flow of information, whether it's personal news, broader world events, or insights into other perspectives. By controlling what the target knows, the manipulator can shape their perception of reality, making their viewpoints appear as the only valid interpretation. Over time, This form of cognitive isolation can lead the target to become detached from the reality outside of the manipulator's influence, making it difficult for them to make informed decisions independently. In more severe instances, manipulators may employ spatial or physical isolation. This could involve moving the target away from their familiar environment to a new location where the manipulator has greater control. In essence, the physical distance from their support network serves to sever existing bonds and reinforces the target's reliance on the manipulator. The new environment can also be used as a means of control. Unfamiliarity can induce anxiety, making the target more pliable and willing to cling to the manipulator, who becomes a gatekeeper to their sense of safety and normalcy. Isolation is particularly insidious when it is imperceptible to the target. Often the process is incremental, with the manipulator gradually instilling the idea that time spent with them is far more valuable and fulfilling than time spent elsewhere. By gradually pushing the target to prioritize the manipulative relationship over others, the target may not even realize they are being isolated until they are deeply entrenched in the manipulator's influence and have become alienated from others. In facilitating isolation, emotional manipulation is a common tactic. Manipulators tend to exploit the target's feelings, eliciting sympathy or guilt to coax them into compliance. They might portray themselves as victims or claim to have the target's best interest at heart, manipulating their emotions to secure a deeper commitment. The intention is to create an emotional fog that clouds judgment and overrides the target's rational thinking, making it harder for them to discern the manipulation that is taking place. As isolation progresses, the target's self-esteem is often eroded. Constantly being told, directly or indirectly, that their connections are unsupportive or harmful to their well-being leads to self-doubt. Low self-esteem makes individuals more controllable, as they come to believe that they are incapable of managing their life or making decisions without the manipulator's input. Consequently, this diminished self-worth perpetuates dependency on the manipulator for validation and decision-making. Finally, to maintain isolation and ensure continued dependence, a manipulator may engage in intermittent reinforcement. This involves an unpredictable pattern of rewards and punishments to create a state of uncertainty and obedience. When the target complies with the isolation, they are rewarded, perhaps with affection or praise. However, attempts to reconnect with their old support system are met with punishment, such as anger or withdrawal. This erratic pattern can be highly addictive, as the target becomes fixated on gaining the manipulator's approval, further incentivizing them to maintain the isolation. Isolation as a manipulative strategy ends up restructuring the target's social world in a way that elevates the manipulator to a position of sole confidant and guide, effectively ensuring their compliance and diminishes their autonomy. Understanding and recognizing the methods and consequences of isolation are crucial in preventing and countering manipulation attempts. It is imperative for individuals to maintain diverse and strong support networks and to be aware of the gradual signs of isolation to defend against covert efforts to undermine their independence. 3.10. The Dark Tetrad: Narcissism, Machiavellianism, Psychopathy, Sadism. The concept of the Dark Tetrad encompasses four distinct yet interrelated personality traits: narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism, that are linked to various manipulation tactics and strategies. Understanding these traits is essential in exploring the dynamics of how individuals can influence, control, or exploit others. This chapter section delves into each element of the Dark Tetrad, discussing their characteristics, how they manifest in behavior, and the potential impact on manipulation and interpersonal relations. Narcissism is characterized by grandiosity, a need for admiration, and a lack of empathy for others. Narcissistic individuals tend to have an inflated sense of self-importance and believe they are superior to others. They are preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. In manipulation, narcissists often use charm, seduction, or eloquence to influence others. They may exaggerate or fabricate stories about their achievements to gain admiration or compliance from their audience. The target's admiration feeds the narcissist's self-esteem, which is critical to their sense of self. In contrast, Machiavellianism is defined by a manipulative interpersonal style, a cynical disregard for morality, and a focus on self-interest and deception. Machiavellian individuals are skilled in manipulating others for their own gain, viewing relationships as opportunities to exploit. They are adept at strategizing and can maintain a calm and collected demeanor, even in deceitful situations. Machiavellian tactics include the calculated use of flattery, lying, and the orchestration of complex schemes to control others. These individuals are unencumbered by the guilt that accompanies deception, seeing it instead as a necessary means to an end. Psychopathy is a personality trait typified by persistent antisocial behavior, impaired empathy and remorse, boldness and disinhibition. Psychopaths often have a superficial charm that can be initially attractive to others. They are skilled at feigning emotions they do not feel, making them formidable manipulators. Psychopaths are risk-takers and can be impulsive, which may manifest in their manipulation techniques as they focus on immediate gratification without concern for long-term consequences. They may employ intimidation, verbal aggression, or even physical violence to control or coerce others. Sadism, the fourth trait of the dark tetrad, involves deriving pleasure from inflicting pain, suffering, or humiliation on others. Sadistic individuals may use direct or vicarious means to witness or cause the distress of others. In terms of manipulation, a sadist may employ tactics that demean or devalue their target, enjoying the sense of power this gives them. Unlike the other traits of the dark tetrad, sadism is not marked by a desire for personal gain, but rather by the pursuit of control over others for the emotional pleasure derived from their pain. The interaction between these dark tetrad traits can lead to particularly complex and destructive forms of manipulation. For example, an individual high in narcissism and Machiavellianism might use charm and strategic deceit to maintain an image of superiority while simultaneously exploiting others. If the same individual also possesses psychopathic traits, they may be even more daring and ruthless in their manipulation. The addition of sadistic pleasure from causing distress can amplify the manipulative behavior, making it more harmful and difficult to predict or mitigate. Individuals displaying these dark tetrad traits often operate within environments that are conducive to their manipulation tactics. Workplaces with competitive cultures, social structures with poorly defined or enforced boundaries, and relationships with power imbalances are particularly vulnerable. In such contexts, these individuals find fertile ground to employ their manipulation strategies, targeting the susceptible and leveraging institutional weaknesses. The prevalence of dark tetrad traits varies across populations and settings, but their impact on groups and organizations can be profound. When individuals with these traits ascend to positions of power, they can influence the culture and norms to favor manipulative tactics. This can create an environment where unethical behavior is tolerated or even rewarded, leading to systemic issues within the organization. For instance, decision-making may become skewed toward short-term wins at the expense of long-term sustainability and the welfare of stakeholders. Dealing with manipulation by individuals with dark tetrad traits requires awareness and understanding of these tendencies. Strategies for mitigating the effects include establishing clear codes of conduct, fostering an environment of openness and mutual respect, and implementing robust checks and balances within structures of authority. Additionally, promoting empathy and emotional intelligence within teams and leadership can counteract the influence of dark tetrad traits, as these qualities are often lacking in individuals prone to manipulation. Preventing manipulation associated with the dark tetrad is challenging, but not impossible. Education on these personality traits and their manifestations can empower individuals to recognize and resist manipulative behaviors. Creating a culture that prioritizes ethical behavior and transparency can serve as a deterrent to those who might employ such tactics. Additionally, it is important for organizations and institutions to respond decisively and consistently to unethical conduct, reinforcing a standard of integrity that does not condone manipulation. The dark tetrad represents a complex interplay of traits that can lead to sophisticated and often harmful manipulation strategies. By building awareness and creating environments that strongly oppose such tactics, societies and organizations can protect against the negative impacts of these behaviors. It is crucial to understand the depths and nuances of narcissism, Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and sadism to effectively counteract the influence of individuals who may use these traits to the detriment of others. Through a combination of structure, policy, and culture, it is possible to mitigate the risks and foster healthier, more ethical communities.